Hello and welcome to the No More Week 2025 Tech Summit. It is a pleasure for us to be today here discussing the topic of romance scams. But just because we're gonna go into detail with this, we want to say that the content of this session might be triggering for some people who have experienced uh, this situation. And if you need any kind of support, we advise you to go to the No More Global Directory, where you can find support for services of domestic and sexual violence. It is nomoredirectory.org. And to start, I really want to welcome Tasha and Lucia. Lucia Harris is the Director of Member Protection at Match Group, and Dr. Tasha Menaker, sorry, Tash, just for people not throwing it out there, is a Senior Director of Social Impact, and she's worked with us for ages. An absolute pleasure to have you both. Um, as a matter of an intro, I would like to say that in today's digital age, online dating has become a very popular way to connect with others. And with that comes some problems. And one of them is the increase in online scams, as there are various tactics that are deployed really to exploit people who are actually seeking a meaning relationship. In this session, we'll explore common types of romance scams, uncover scammers, methods, and highlight the steps that Match Group, the parent company of platforms like Tinder and Hinge, are actually taking to combat this type of fraud. You will learn how to identify red flags, protect your information, and support survivors of scams. Join us today to gain some practical tools and insights on this issue with Lucia and Tasha. So, Lucia, let me start with you. Can you explain to us? Let's start from the very basics. What is a romance scam? I'm sure that a lot of people have heard the term and they might not probably, I guess, understand the nuance of what we mean exactly when we talk about romance scams and how do these actually show up in dating apps?
Yeah, great question. So, a romance scam in its most traditional form is a scam in which a scammer builds an emotional relationship with someone and then exploits that trust to get them to send money or some kind of valuable asset. And the key ingredient in these scams is trust. The scammer basically cultivates some kind of romantic connection to manipulate their target into financial transactions. But it's really important to emphasize that there is a really broad spectrum here. There's a lot of different types of scams. There's phishing scams, there's fake job scams, there's investment scams. And what makes a scam more effective is when it is romance enabled. So when a scammer engages the victim through the lens of a relationship. So if you think about a standard phishing scam, we know what those are. You get an email claiming to be from your bank. You want to click a link and enter your login details. That's a phishing scam. Now imagine the person that you've been dating and talking to every night for months sends you an email and it has a link that they're trying to get you to click. That's still technically a phishing scam, right? But it's a romance-enabled one.
Mhm.
Now, romance-enabled phishing scams are not actually a big problem. What is, though, are romance-enabled investment scams. So an investment scam is basically a scam in which you are being tricked into or convinced into buying some kind of asset or cryptocurrency or something like that, investing in a fake asset. And these are the highest growing and most impactful type of scam today. In the last 4 years alone, we've seen about $75 billion in losses, and that is probably really a big underestimation. So one of the things that I think is just really important to emphasize is that romance scams has evolved, and that's why I tend to use the phrase like romance-enabled scams. There's romance scams where it's like, I've convinced you to send me money, but then there's also romance-enabled scams that manifest in different ways, but primarily nowadays as investment scams.
Lucia, we were having a conversation today in the office about how we probably always think that it will not be us that this will happen to. And I would love for you to kind of help us form a little bit of that picture that, really, it's anybody.
It's absolutely anybody. These happen to everyone. It's not any one specific demographic. I think when we think about romance scams traditionally, a lot of the time people like to say, oh, it's people who are less familiar with the internet. It can be like people of a different generation, but it's not. It's just as much Gen Z as it is like boomers. It's every single generation. Everyone is susceptible to these. No one is not susceptible to them. They are highly convincing and highly sophisticated.
What would be some either tips that you would, give people, or some red flags that we can all notice
Yeah.
that, we might be entering into a scam, or we're around there?
Yeah. So there's some very concrete red flags. One, someone trying to move you off a dating app quickly. So they will, push to shift the conversation to a private messaging app as soon as possible, usually saying like, oh, this is just more convenient for me. Um, Fast tracking the romance is another red flag. Excessive flattery, rapid declarations of love. They're really trying to build trust as quickly as possible. And so it might move much faster than a regular romance might. Avoiding excuses or avoiding meeting in person or excuses not to meet in person. They might say there's travel or family emergencies or they're working abroad. So they're doing anything they can to delay meeting in person. Um, Request for money, that's one. Obviously, scammers they may claim to be in some kind of financial crises. They might say there's a medical or a travel or a business problem. And they might start small to start and build trust, but any kind of request for money is a red flag. Another one is secrecy. They'll probably discourage you from discussing the relationship with your friends, with your family, with your financial advisors, and they're claiming to protect your relationship. And then a couple of red flags of more modern day romance scams that include investment scams are financial talk, mentioning cryptocurrency or foreign exchange trading as part of their kind of like success story to try and lure you into investing, sending you screenshots of trading accounts, luxury items, anything that they can kind of use to show you that they are successful and indicate how they could make you successful. Um, they may give you access to a fake trading account so that you can practice. That's a pretty concrete red flag. And then with all scams, one of the big red flags to always watch out for is like urgency and pressure, claiming that these are rare, time-sensitive opportunities, that there's an emergency. Scammers really try and make you not think. They're playing on your emotions, and so they try and put pressure on you so that you will move quickly.
I can appreciate how this is cross-generational in the sense that if you think you know about crypto, for example, a bit, you might think, oh no, I do understand. It's not gonna passive happen to me. This he's just telling me how to do an investment, for example, right? So as before, we would have had that big myth that people that just didn't know, didn't understand were the ones that were trapped. I love that you talk about trust, building trust being the basis or the difference really with this type of scam, right? That it is, I guess that some people might think if they are not there for a period of time, uh, you know, if they were like trying to take money, this person wouldn't have been talking to me for 3 months already. And so I would love to get your thoughts in terms of the length of time that some of these scams might take to actually, get the money that they're looking for.
Yeah. So these scams can play out over months, over even years. And I think one of the things that's important to emphasize is it's not even just the length of the relationship, although that is a core trust builder, but the scammers are also sophisticated enough. And this, again, is why everyone is susceptible because these are highly sophisticated. One of the things that makes these scams particularly convincing is that in very many occasions, the scammers actually allow you to profit. So what they'll do is they'll have you invest in a fake platform and then you'll see, oh, I've made $10,000. And they'll say to you, why don't you take that $10,000 out? You invested $100. Now you've made 10,000. Take it out. Go to your bank account. Like you can send the money back to your bank account, and they're actually able, the first time they try it, to get $10,000 out. And it's not fake money, it's real money. It's in their bank account. Now you can imagine how much confidence that builds. You're like, your friends and family are saying, hey, I'm seeing some red flags. I think this might be a scammer. And you're like, no, look, it's not like $10,000 in my crypto account. It's $10,000 in my Chase bank account. Like,
Mm.
this is real. There's no way this is a scam. I've made money. How could that possibly work? And that is like one of the risks that scammers take in order to lure you into this, because the next time you try and take out money, you won't be able to. And so it's both like the length of the relationship, the frequency of communication, and also that clear evidence that, they give people to really lean on to build that trust.
So Lucia, obviously this is a big problem. It affects so many people. It's so much money. What is Match Group doing to address romance scams?
Yeah. So we have what I call like our 4A approach. So the first pillar in this strategy is awareness, educating users to recognize and avoid scams. We do that through providing in-app safety tips, notifications throughout the user journey, from everywhere from profile creation to your first message. When users exchange contact information with scammers, or with someone that we later determine to be a scammer, they'll receive a proactive warning saying like, hey, John, who you matched with last Friday, is actually, like, we believe them to be engaging in fraudulent behavior. And we also have a variety of different educational guides, including our healthy dating guide that we launched in partnership with Nomar in 10 plus languages. So education and awareness is a big part of this. The second pillar is authentication and authenticity. So building trust through verification tools. We offer things like photo verification and ID verification to help users confirm the authenticity of their matches. Badges for verified profiles empower users to make informed choices about engaging with others. But also, these are tools in a user's toolkit so that if you're matching with someone that gives you red flags, you could say, hey, would you mind just verifying your profile because I'm feeling a little unsure? And if they refuse to comply with that, that's an even bigger red flag. The third pillar is advanced detection, so using AI and machine learning to proactively identify scammers. We are banning 44 inauthentic accounts every single minute across our platforms. And of the scammers that do get through, about 90% of them are removed before they're ever able to match with anyone at all, so before they're ever reported. And we use a variety of different AI-driven tools, including behavioral analysis and language models, to try and detect scamming patterns in real time. And then our fourth pillar is alliance, which means working cross-industry to stop scams at the source. So Match Group co-founded the Tech Against Scams Coalition, which brings together social media, dating, fintech, crypto platforms to basically share intelligence in order to disrupt scam operations. We're advocating for stronger industry standards, and we're also working in partnership with law enforcement, different financial institutions, and victim support organizations to try and prevent the scams that are happening beyond just our own platforms.
I love to hear that, and I love to see this kind of in all the issues that relate to coercive control. For example, we know that having a variety of stakeholders are needed to actually kind of combat that. And why do you believe that that is really important?
Yeah, because scams don't just take place on one platform, right? They might start on a dating app, but then they're going to quickly move to an encrypted messaging app, and from there they might move to a crypto exchange. That's exactly why we established Tech Against Scams, to take an ecosystem-wide approach, because we recognize that scammers are exploiting multiple platforms and sectors when they target people. And our coalition spans all of these industries, and basically our approach is really three threefold here. We're trying to leverage each company's unique position in this ecosystem to drive collective action through shaping better industry standards, through driving consumer awareness, and through building connective tissue between these different platforms to foster cross-industry collaboration through shared intelligence, through shared data, and through shared strategies to try and keep pace with these ever-evolving threats.
And Tasha, I've seen firsthand some of the partnership work that Match Group does. Why do you think this is really important, especially for this topic?
Yeah, I think echoing what Lucia said, I think that holistic approach is really critical to addressing any type of harm that's happening on our platform. And so in addition to these cross-industry partnerships that Lucia has been fostering, we've also been working with NGOs around the globe, some who specialize in scam recovery and support for survivors, others who maybe have traditionally focused on gender-based violence, but have expanded their scope to also support survivors of this kind. And I think it's been really important for us to work with organizations who are directly working with survivors, who are getting feedback from them that they can share with us that we use to make actionable change. We also partner with NGOs on user education initiatives. So Lucia mentioned our healthy dating guide we've done with No More. We recently launched a scam-focused prevention guide with an NGO in Spain called Asociación Onsame. So this is a great way for us to leverage partners' expertise and use their platforms as well to get the word out as widely as possible.
I think that is it is really interesting because even for myself here talking about this topic, there is something about this that seems to kind of circle the barrier of kind of the gender-based violence and coercive control, but not traditionally. Right? Because of the type of way that the violence is being exercised, or the control is being exercised, is definitely falls in the remit, but it's not being the traditional kind of way in which organizations have had to intervene. So in a way, that's why we appreciate this conversation, because we know there will be many who have heard the stories, and we want to make sure that survivors are not being dismissed as, well, why did you give your money? This is your problem. Goodbye. We have other people to attend to, right? Whilst we know this can be devastating. So moving into that, Tasha, I would like to start talking about the emotional kind of impact that we know romance scams have in survivors.
Yes, I think Lucia said something so powerful, which is that the key ingredient with these types of scams is trust. And so what that means is that once someone has experienced this form of harm, their trust has significantly been disrupted. And so now not only do they have distrust of others, they also question their own judgment and their own decision making. And they experience a lot of fear in terms of going into new relationships. There's also a ton of stigma around romance scams, as you said, Pamela. And so just like survivors of sexual and domestic violence, I think scam survivors also experience a lot of self-blame, a lot of shame. They're more likely to isolate themselves. They feel embarrassed to tell their friends and family and reach out to their support system. So they're more likely to kind of try and manage this on their own. And as you can imagine, this is someone who's not just lost funds, but they've also lost what is to them a relationship. And so something we've heard from survivors is not just feelings of depression and anxiety because they may have handed their life savings over, but also feelings of grief around the loss of the funds, but also loss of a relationship. And a lot of survivors, they recognize, like, logically, this wasn't a real relationship. But there's still that feeling of missing the connection and the interaction and the attention. And so I do think it's important as advocates, because we know that healing is nuanced, to think about some of those nuances when it comes to scams, even when sometimes the feeling seems counterintuitive at first glance.
Lucia, anything to add here?
Yeah, I think, it's just we have to really talk about scams like what they are, which is crimes. I think victims internalize so much guilt about this. And you'll see in like Reddit forums and stuff, people talking about like, well, why didn't they know? How could they not see this? And they're scared to come to friends and family because they feel like they should have known better. If someone was held up at gunpoint, they wouldn't expect their friends and family to be like, well, what were you doing walking down the street? But for whatever reason, we don't approach scams the same way, and we really need to start treating them like that. Someone has had they have had money and emotions stolen from them. It is a crime, and that's like what has happened.
I mean, the amount of shame
Yeah.
just surrounding this might be greater than, than even, a domestic violence situation where people would more traditionally understand how this, yeah. And that idea that, oh, that wouldn't happen to me, that we spoke about at the beginning, which I think we all walk with when we hear these stories. So what advice, Tasha, will you give a service provider who is confronted with, a romance scam, and maybe they don't know what to do or how to go about it?
Yeah, I would take it even a step back and just say, we want everyone to feel safe and empowered using dating apps. And I think that's not just us as Match Group, but even as advocates, we want survivors to feel safe and comfortable and go back into the world and build new relationships. And so I would suggest for advocates thinking about safety planning broadly, which I think gender-based violence advocates are already very good at, and thinking about that through someone's entire dating journey. What are the things that they should think about when they're creating their profile? What are the things that they want to keep private and the things that they're comfortable with someone else seeing? What are those red flags and green flags as you're meeting new people and messaging with new people? What are the considerations in real life that you want to think about? And so those tips that Lucia provided, and we have these available also within our safety centers on our apps, and we're happy to share resources with any attendees to this conference, but use those prevention tips when you're working with survivors, I think every single time. But specifically, if you have a scam survivor that's coming to you looking for support, I think it's important to remember how overwhelming this situation can be for someone. They may not know what to do and which direction they want to go in, and we shouldn't make assumptions about what their priority is. So we should start by asking the survivor what's their greatest concern. Some survivors are really going to be focused on recovering those lost funds and preventing further breaches of security on their accounts or their devices. Other survivors really might want to focus on that mental health piece, and their primary concern is that they're feeling isolated and depressed. Maybe it's that they're feeling lonely, but understanding that greatest need, I think, helps you know where to start in supporting that survivor. And as we've really reinforced, we know scam survivors, like most survivors, they're feeling a lot of self-blame and shame. Myself, in talking with survivors, I always like to be equipped with some facts because I feel like that can sometimes normalize people's experience. And so a number of the things Lucia said, I think would be helpful to reiterate when you're working with someone. Scam survivor or scammers are really sophisticated. This is something that they're doing all day long. They've made a job out of figuring out how to perpetrate scams and fraud. And so reminding survivors that they're not alone in this, knowing information that, like Lucia shared, that scams are in the billions. People have lost billions. So these scams are becoming increasingly more common, and the survivor sitting in front of you, they're not the only person that this has happened to. I do think it's important to be honest with survivors of scams that it can be really difficult to recover funds and sometimes impossible. There are steps that they can take, but level setting, I think, is important. And there's a number of good resources out there. So I am a big fan of the Better Business Bureau's Scam Survival Toolkit. That's a great starting point, especially in the US. Most of the resources are US specific in there, but the pathways that you can walk through in the toolkit could be really helpful for an advocate, knowing the questions to ask. What was the harm you experienced? Was it losing money, or was it that somebody compromised your account? what is your primary concern? Is it mental health focused? Is it focused on the financial concerns? And so that's a great toolkit just as a starting point to walk a survivor through. We also work with the Cybercrime Support Network, which has a scam survivor recovery group. So the more you can find other resources where survivors can be with each other and feel, truly feel that they are not alone, I think that's a place to start as well. So there's a number of organizations that are providing resources. I will say, though, I think one of the challenges is that right now we don't currently have a global guide, at least that I know of. So please let us know if we're wrong. But as far as we know, we don't have a global guide or repository of resources that's related to scams. So I'm going to turn it over to Lucia because this is actually something we've been working on. So Lucia, maybe do you want to talk a little bit more about our partnership with Throughline?
Sure. Yeah, so one of our key partners is Throughline. They are the world's largest network of verified support lines. And as we've had conversations with them over the past year, they were sharing this growing trend, which is that more and more individuals in crisis who are coming to them for mental health support are coming to them because they have fallen victim to scams. And so they recognize that there was a really critical need to kind of make sure that those people had access to the right support and information during those critical moments. So we've been developing basically a very straightforward guide on what to do if you've been scammed, just clear, actionable steps to help everyone navigate what to do next. And part of that means reporting to law enforcement and making sure that you have regionally specific resources. And so we're building out a global directory with them to ensure that no matter where in the world someone is, they know exactly where and how to report a scam, and they can be connected with the appropriate authorities. And the other thing that we're putting in there, and that I would recommend to every kind of like victim support or victim advocacy group, is making sure that people are aware about the potential for recovery scams. So right at the top of the Throughline guide, it's going to say beware recovery scams, and there's going to be a way to tap in and get more information on that. What a recovery scam is it is, someone has lost money and they're pretty panicked, right? Like you've lost often a huge amount of money, and maybe you're posting about it to a Facebook group, or maybe you're posting about it in a Reddit forum, or maybe you're posting about it, wherever. Scammers will come and see that, and they will reach out to you and say, hey, I'm a lawyer. I work with, different cryptocurrency companies, and I can help you get your money back. You just have to pay me this fee. So they're trying to re-victimize people. And unfortunately, that's also a very high grossing scam. And so you want to make sure that people are aware that this type of scam exists, that it is highly likely that if they are talking about their experience somewhere, that they may get targeted by this type of scammer. And so just making sure that that is front and center on everyone's minds. I think what Tasha said about like level setting, about how difficult it can be to recover funds, making sure people know there is no like easy solution, or if you just pay, $100,000 or, how $5,000, like this person's going to get you your money back. Unfortunately, that's not real. That is
Right.
almost definitely a scam. So making
Yeah.
sure that that's front and center for everyone.
Thank you so much for that. And to finish, I would love to, we're asking this question to every presenter in the conference. And what is an action that you believe we need to make sure that technology is here to help us, not to harm us? So Tasha, I'm going to start with you. And yes.
So that's a great question. I think with this specific topic of romance scams, we have to remember that just the nature of the crime in and of itself means that it tends to happen to people who are inherently generous and trusting and who have open hearts and minds. And so as advocates and loved ones of these people, we want to make sure that we embrace those characteristics and we help them to preserve those characteristics. And at the same time, we want to empower people to use technology with confidence. And from my perspective, I actually think online dating is in many ways a safer form of dating because it gives you the opportunity to connect with people in advance And do a little bit of your own research and spend as much time as you want to talking to them online and building that relationship before you actually meet them in person and continue to foster that potential connection. So I think technology can be a space for you to take your time. And that's something that I want us to embrace about it.
Thank you. Lucia.
And I think technology, I echo everything Tasha said. And I also think it can be a really great way to build awareness and to amplify the message about the fact that scams can happen to anyone. I think the more that we can talk about it, the more that we can destigmatize it, the more that we can make it clear that this is happening to every type of person, every demographic, every age. It's happening to neuroscientists, it's happening to investment bankers. It doesn't matter what you do, who you are. Scammers will come after you, and it can happen on any type of platform. It's definitely not specific to dating apps. And so I think technology is a really great way to make sure that people are aware that these things exist, that they can happen to anyone, that there should not be a stigma around it, and that with education and knowledge, we can really empower one another to navigate technology more safely.
Thank you both for Tasha and Lucia for being here. Thank you to Match Group for supporting the conference in general. It's been a pleasure to have you to learn about romance scams, and I'm sure that this has actually unveiled a lot of the myths that we have, especially coming from Match Group. Thank you so much, and thank you everybody who has attended this session and has heard us today.